Lux Brom up against Fizdarth Darrowing. So
Alright, this is what I was excited to see. This is what I wanted for game number 1.
exactly as what you predicted, that Fizdarth is gonna come in with his Dare Harrowing.
So
Here
I
we see.
actually... Oh, I was going to say, I really like this keep out of Oooooozzy. The Mage Seeker Conservator is a little bit of a strange card, but I saw it, get some big hits for him a little bit earlier on in the tournament, and doesn't have a 6-cost spell to pair with the Mage Seeker just yet. But because that is a card that can sit on board and wait for you to play the 6-cost spell, it can get that value a little bit later on, and I don't think there's much Fizdarth is actually going to be able to do to threaten it in the meantime.
Yes, exactly, and especially if he high road into things like a Remembrance, would really help Uzi at this point of time.
Yeah, instead we're going to see 2 Tavern Keepers off the top, but I don't think he's going to be mad at that either. It's obviously, another very good card in this matchup, getting that early healing down. And there we see the Crimson Disciple that's going to, go for that critical 3-attack breakpoint.
Yep, and coming on into turn number 3, the first Cunning Tavern Keeper actually coming down. So health is of all value right now to Uzi. And he do not want to ever fall below 12 or 10 health at this point against the matchup. And every point of healing is going to be important for Uzi at this point of time.
Yeah, and this attack from the Tavern Keeper feels so safe. If your opponent wants to trade the Ballista without being able to get the damage off onto it, you're going to feel really good about that. The question is Oooooozzy going to block this Crimson Disciple with the Mage Seeker Conservator and try to soften it up for a couple of Braum attacks, eat the damage in the meantime because he has this second Kindly Tavern Keeper, or is he just going to let it rack up damage on him until he can get down another 3-attack unit to block it out?
Yes, exactly. And here we see Fizdarth blocking in with the Iron Ballista into the Tavern Keeper. So what do you think of this particular block? Do you think it's valuable for Fizdarth, or just taking the 3 damage going base would be a better option?
I think it puts him on a very narrow range of hands. I think that Transfusion really isn't on the table for Fizdarth anymore. I think that he'd be fine sort of taking the damage in the meantime. I think Fizdarth has a lot of liberty to play with his life total in a matchup like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, maybe you're just worried that the Braum is going to come down on the following turn, get too big of a swing onto something like that. It's too good of a target. You get that Mighty Poro out. Now the Braum is almost halfway to being leveled. And I think it's just indicative that he didn't have a combat trick to stop the Braum play from happening, and he was very worried about it. But instead, we see this Babbling Beard come out, and that's going to pick up this Radiant Guardian, which is massive.
Yes, exactly. And coming into turn 5, the next turn, the Radiant Guardian is going to be so huge against any aggro decks in the meta right now.
So something that we actually didn't get a chance to touch on when looking at the deck list is that there are 3 Babbling Beard in this deck out of Oooooozzy, and the only thing it can hit is Radiant Guardian and upgraded Lux. So as long as he gets to play them on curve before that Lux is upgraded, he's always going to be getting Radiant Guardians and getting that critical lifesteal unit down to stay at that healthy life total outside of the Darius range.
Yep, and a block over here is really difficult over here for Uzi, because his staff actually have 2 mana up right now. A Transfusion will be in the range, and Uzi could potentially take up to 2 more extra damage at this point of time. 4 more extra damage at this point.
Yeah, and because there are 2 disciples on the field of Fizdarth, you're not really safe from any blocks. I think this is the one that gives you sort of the least worst option if a Transfusion does come out in terms of trades. Of course, Fizdarth can still use it to push through a lot of damage with the unblocked disciples, but I think that this is probably your best bet in terms of blocks if you are playing around the Transfusion.
Yes, and of course we see a Transfusion coming in right now immediately. Taking the trade of the Babbling Beard, I think should be fine with this particular trade.
Yeah, Uzi should feel good about that one. The question now is, do you attack with this Mage Seeker knowing your opponent's going to block just to force the Radiant Guardian down, or do you just try to maybe heal back up with this Tavern Keeper, develop a Avarosan Sentry as well, sort of, save a little bit of spell mana going into this Unyielding Spirit turn? But it looks like he is just going to force the Radiant Guardian, and actually Fizdarth's not going to fall for it, understanding that that is the only Babbling Beard target in the deck, knowing that Uzi has one in hand.
And attacking first would be great as well, because if he blocks, he has the option of going the Radiant Guardian. But however, if he doesn't block, he takes that 1 damage, he could go for the Tavern Keeper play as well. So it allows more flexibility for Uzi at this point of time.
Yeah, and because he's got that Avarosan Sentry to come down with it as well, because these Crimson Disciples have been damaged, one by the Transfusion and now one by the Demolitionist, that's even going to pair up pretty well. The concern now, actually, no, so he just has to play the Tavern Keeper, and that's still going to keep him out of this 10 health range for the Darius on turn 6.
Yes, but however, Fizdarth having 3 cards in hand, options are fairly limited at this point of time.
Just the pass over. Yeah, there's the Tavern Keeper.
Yes.
If Fizdarth has the Noxian Fervor, that's kind of the only way that we see the Darius come online. And if that does happen, Oooooozzy's actually in a pretty rough spot. He doesn't have a great answer for that at the moment.
Yes, and here we see Fizdarth passing around over to P, and the token being over to Fizdarth's side. And we see a Darius coming down from Fizdarth's side of the field.
Yeah, as much as Oooooozzy doesn't want to, I think this Radiant Guardian kind of has to be the play. You want to get a trade down onto that Darius as cleanly as possible before, it can before it can stick around long enough to see the 10 health fall below and sort of get that level up animation off. But with only one Tavern Keeper left in the deck, Oooooozzy's pretty limited on healing unless he can get a good, couple of blocks down, get this Radiant Guardian up to that, lifesteal tough kind of level. But without any single combats in hand, it can be a little bit tough for him to actually get consistent value out of a card like this.
Yes, exactly. So probably, a Radiant Guardian here would get a trade off the Darius. But however, if Fizdarth actually have a fusion or any kind of form of combat trick, it might be a little rough for Oooooozzy at this point.
Yeah, even a Transfusion just with the Double Disciple should be able to get Oooooozzy below that 10 health breakpoint, and I think that's why we see him play the Radiant Guardian. It's just the safest option he has available to him.
Here we see Fizdarth going in with the full attack.
Yeah, these blocks are pretty straightforward. You don't want to take any damage from these Disciples and get yourself down below that breakpoint, but now the Radiant Guardian isn't available to Oooooozzy anymore. He's going to have to find another one and do it pretty soon.
Yes, of course, and Oooooozzy does not have any 6 mana spell that could allow him to gain access to those Mage Seeker ability. And here we see a flip Darius coming down for Fizdarth.
So I think this actually might be the first time that I've seen the health buff onto Darius actually come into play. Consistently, I either see this card, killed with 6 HP or overkilled or something along those lines. But here, actually living at the 1 HP thanks to the buff. I don't know if you've ever seen this come up before, but for me, this is a first.
Yeah, we've seen lots of time where Darius actually took advantage of this particular one health buff, and yeah, currently right now we are witnessing directly. And he has a second Radiant Guardian coming off the top with a Brom, and he might be in a little bit of a danger right now. Oooooozzy at 4 health, a single Decimate could just close the game over here for Oooooozzy.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what Oooooozzy's next couple of turns can look like. He can either, sacrifice the Braum and then he can get down another blocker, but I think that on the next turn he's going to have 11 mana available to him, which is just enough for the Stand United into the Detain off the Mage Seeker Investigator, because that is a burst speed spell. And I think that, this 6 mana burst speed spell could be critical for kind of turning this game back into Oooooozzy's favor, but he's got to find a way to get that Radiant Guardian down soon in order to get his life above that Decimate breakpoint that you had mentioned.
Yes, exactly. And passing turn over to Fizdarth. Does Fizdarth actually have that Decimate in hand?
I would be really surprised if he played Precious Pet before he played Decimate. And the concern with this Braum, going for the Stand United play on the following turn does mean that your opponent has another turn to potentially draw a Darius that will turn into a Darius's Decimate. And now with this Legion Grenadier out, things are getting even dicier.
Yes, and especially when Fizdarth has so many ways to do damage into Nexus right now, and Oooooozzy is at 4 health at a very, very awkward position. Here comes a Legion Saboteur.
All right, so Oooooozzy falls to, I believe, 1 if everything goes according to plan. Actually, he might just be dead. I think that he's only got 3 blockers. If you count the Detain, he's still going to have 1 unit hit him in the face, and that's 3 damage represented by the Grenadier and the Saboteur. and I don't think he's going to get through this without killing the Grenadier before he can get down that Radiant Guardian, and I'm pretty sure this is just lethal for Fizdarth.
Yes, definitely. And Fizdarth currently have a creature advantage as well, even though with the detain, one of his creature would leak some damage into the Nexus.
Yeah, it looks like we are going to get that Stand United into Detain play, but I think it's just too little too late. Oooooozzy, unfortunately, not able to get the Radiant Guardians down in an impactful way this game. And yeah, things just lining up for Fizdarth, and this is the one matchup that I said I wanted to see. You know, can this Braum Lux deck stop the Darius deck if it runs hot? And the answer is no. This deck didn't even really run hot. It just ran kind of medium. We only saw one Iron Ballista. We didn't see any copies of Harrowing or Basilisk Rider. So maybe this just isn't as good a matchup as I thought, or maybe Oooooozzy just drew a little bit unfortunate this game. We did see him clog up on, you know, a couple copies of the Mage Seeker Investigator, that single Unyielding Spirit playing against him. And, you know, it's possible that it's just a little bit of a brick hand.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, so this is probably it for Oooooozzy at this point of time. Here comes the Stand United.
I thought he was going to line up the Detain onto the Legion Grenadier, and I was like, oh, that's so smart. That saves him because it stops the 2 damage. But then you just take 5 from the Darius, and that is a lot more than the 2 this Grenadier is representing.
So yeah, the Darius is a really strong card right now to be facing against. And here we see a scoop over from Oooooozzy over here, and he's down 1-0 against Fizdarth. Moving into game number 2.
Yeah, but as we had talked about a little bit in the, you know, in this sort of pregame lobby, it really comes down to whether or not Fizdarth's going to be able to pick up a win with this Ezreal Vi deck that he's brought.
Yeah, that particular deck will be the weakness of for Fizdarth over here. But yeah, here we see Oooooozzy going in with his Karma Ezreal. Do you think like this particular swap would be beneficial for him?
I don't think it matters too much. I mean, I'm not sure. You know, maybe he's got a better read on which deck Fizdarth is bringing in, if he's going to play the Ezreal or if he's going to go for the Kenku Elusives. I think that the Braum Lux is kind of fine into either one of those decks, but maybe Oooooozzy just wants to get some reps in with the Karma Lux, kind of switch off the deck and take a breather. Some players really like to stick with one deck for as long as possible. You know, just get the reps in on it, get that muscle memory down. You know, kind of give yourself a little bit of a snowball effect into a couple of games. And other players, when they lose with the deck, they just want to put it down. They're like, you know, I had a bad game with it. I want to sort of hit a mental reset button and switch over to something else. And Oooooozzy going to get us started off with Eye of the Dragon. That's going to give him a little bit more spell mana to play with, but Fizdarth not running any 1-drops in this deck, I think. No, there are Jagged Butchers in the deck, but not finding any of those on turn 1. Looks like he's not finding anything super impactful on turn 2 either. The Chempunk Pickpocket not coming down, but there's only one Dreadway deckhand in the deck as well, so it's, you know, pretty reasonable that he's missing on these couple of turns. And now we see the improved Petty Officer coming down, getting Draven's biggest fan, but outside of Noxus, his fandom means nothing. He's not going to get anything to the top of Fizdarth's deck.
Yeah, so what do you think of this Petty Officer buff over here? Is it really great? Does it increase his playability?
When I saw the patch, I thought that Petty Officer was probably one of the biggest winners. I think that the card was really good, but only played in a very narrow range of decks. It was pretty much only coming out in that like Shadow Isle Bilgewater Keg control, the Gangplank Thresh that we typically saw. And now with the buff, we're seeing it come out in a much wider spread of decks, just summoning those random 1-drops more often than not. And it's kind of weird to see it not come out in these sort of barrel-focused decks and instead just constantly presenting rather a bigger board for your opponent to deal with, and it feels just like a more impactful House Spider.
Yeah, and also we have been seeing it in more and more like scout decks or abandonment style kind of deck as well, because of the additional or because of the new effect. It's because of the effect of having another 1 mana.
Yeah, if there's one thing Island Navigator has taught me, it's that there are very, very few bad 1-drops in Legends of Runeterra. So I definitely understand this card coming out. And, you know, being able to survive things like the Static Shock and the Withering Wail is massive, because Oooooozzy, you know, if he had the capabilities of saving a Static Shock for that Petty Officer and killing the Draven's biggest fan on top of it, that'd be a completely different game. He'd still have this Mystic Shot. He'd be up a card. Fizdarth would be in a much worse position. So we're already seeing these health buffs play out big for Fizdarth, both on the Petty Officer and the Darius.
Yep, and here we see a Make It Rain into a Static Shock, forcing the SA to go down right over here. And seems like Oooooozzy does not have a play to play against this particular play.
Yeah, typically I don't see these Ezreal Bilgewater decks win the game with Ezreal very often. It's usually I get down the Riptide, that levels the Ezreal, and we kind of go from there. But now on turn 5, FizdarthYT's Ezreal is already half leveled off of that play.
Yeah, and that is really, really fast, you know, especially with Make It Rain. Its ability to level up Ezreal has been tripled for a 2-mana spell.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, Uzi's got kind of a strange hand. I think he's definitely wishing that the Karma in his hand was one of those copies of Vi. And Key Guardian is a card that I think he's just going to kind of have to run out here. He might just go for a Naked Deep Meditation. It doesn't feel nearly as good with that 5 mana cost, and that's why we've seen it cut from a lot of things like the Karma Lux list. It's just hard to get off multiple spells in decks sometimes. And with this hand from Oooooozzy, I think he's going to run into a similar problem, unless he wants to just fire off this Key Guardian.
I believe firing his Key Guardian over here onto Ezreal or the Karma would be good. And at the same time, he gets to draw another card. Instead, here we see a Static Shock adding 2 more attacks to Ezreal.
Yeah, so this Ezreal is at 3 out of 4 to the, or 3 out of 8 rather, to the 4 out of 8 of FizdarthYT, if I've done my math correctly.
It's slightly slower for Oooooozzy right now, but I believe with the discounted Deep Meditation in his hand, he might have an out against his stuff.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was going to fire off the double deep meditation rather, and sort of keep this Dragon Link train going, but I don't think that's actually super impactful for him. We're going to see him heal up to 19 here, and then having it on the following turn doesn't make too much of a difference. But this Vi is pretty close to getting out of control for FizdarthYT. We do see another concussive palm in Uzi's hand. But this Eye of the Dragon being beat up so relentlessly by this Static Shock and Make It Rain combination, it's not something you can really play to protect at this point. There's probably just a few too many things that sort of take it out.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, so coming in, and what do you think would FizdarthYT possible play right over here?
So I think he's really just contemplating whether or not he wants to push a little bit of damage onto his Vi, or if he's fine taking the damage from the Dragon Link. It looks like he has another card in hand that he's able to play. Could be a Mystic Shot onto the Shadow Assassin, another Make It Rain trying to snipe out the Eye of the Dragon and the Dragon Link. But it looks like he's not going to fire off whatever it was, and Oooooozzy also not going to fire off one of these discounted Deep Meditations, instead taking his spell mana into the next turn, which reads to me like he wants to play Concussive Palm and Static Shock. Or throw down this Chump Bump that he top decked.
Well, a concussive pump on this turn, it will be really, really impactful against the Vi, and at the same time, he would have another creature as well, a 3/2 Tail of the Dragon.
This sparring student for FizdarthYT is coming in massive already. As I said, there aren't a lot of bad 1-drops in Legends of Runeterra, and this is definitely one of the better ones that you could get. We already see it up to a 3/3 thanks to that one of Dreadway deckhand. And there's not a phenomenal way to deal with this barrel on the side of Oooooozzy. The Static Shock is a bit of an expensive answer. We could just see another spell come out in response from FizdarthYT. But critically, Oooooozzy now does have the mushrooms, and I think, without a rummage in hand, it's very possible that we just see him run out both copies of these mushrooms, or maybe a Key Guardian and a mushroom, just to get this Eye of the Dragon proc back on the table, to get the discounted deep meditations on the following turn. But so far, Oooooozzy not doing a phenomenal job of leveling up this Ezreal. This Static Shock has been a little bit awkward to play thus far. I think he's got to fire it off next turn if he wants to start scaling better than FizdarthYT is.
Yes, exactly. And I believe like the concussive palm right over here to protect Eye of the Dragon might be best possible play over here for Oooooozzy.
It's possible he wants to hang on to it, but I don't think he's got a lot of other great options for the remainder of his turn if that is the direction that he wants to go. And yeah, we are going to see the concussive palm fired off onto the Vi. I think this makes a fair bit of sense. Getting that Eye of the Dragon proc off from here on out is going to be pretty important, not just for the lifesteal, but to also try and help fight for the board or just push additional damage at your opponent.
Yes, exactly, and especially when FizdarthYT is constantly having creatures that have an additional creature that comes off it. having the board right now would be really, really important for Oooooooozzy right now.
Yeah, and if I've done my math, we're up to 4 targets for Uzi and 5 for Fizdarth. So Fizdarth's still just a little bit ahead on that Ezreal race, but as we do know, Uzi already has that Ezreal available to him, as well as a lot of spells in hand. And, in an Ezreal mirror, I've got to always give the edge to the player that has the karma to go along with it.
Exactly, and here top deck, he top deck a deny off the top, and the deny is probably gonna be really, really important in this matchup to protect both his karma and Ezreal.
Yeah, this is the scary turn. Does Fizdarth have that warning shot Riptide Rex that would completely decimate Uzi's board? And, without a Will of Ionia in hand to stop this Vi, we could just see Fizdarth pick it up on the following turn if that is the case here.
So does Fizdarth actually have that Riptide Rex? And he passes the turn. Fizdarth actually trying to bait Oooooooozzy to put more creatures on the board?
It seems really weird to me in a deck that is as low unit as the Karma Ezreal, but Uzi's going to fire off the Key Guardian and pass right back after counting out his hand, realizing he's not going to overdraw on the following turn. And, it's possible that Fizdarth has the Rex and just doesn't have the Warning Shot activator. Does have a little bit of mana available if he wants to fire off something like a Mystic Shot at Uzi's face to get it done, but we'll kind of have to see how this one plays out.
So the turn is back to Fizdarth right now. Does Fizdarth have that copy of Riptide Rex? And he still passes it back to Oooooooozzy and using a half cap and passing it back to Fizdarth. I think Oooooooozzy is trying to bait out something of Fizdarth. You know that Fizdarth have something in hand, but he's not willing to bait.
Yeah, it looks like Fizdarth is trying to get Uzi to tap down below a certain amount of mana, and I'm not totally sure what it is. There's not a lot of big spells in Fizdarth's deck that the Deny could come out on that he's really worried about. So I think that with Fizdarth passing like this, his hand, it's got to be, at least one copy of Ezreal. I'd be willing to bet that there's a second copy of Vi in there. Just there's not a lot that he could have that makes him not want to play cards on that turn. I think it's got to be like Vi, Ezreal, probably a Riptide Rex, maybe a Black Market Merchant, and he's just struggled to get the Plunder effect off on his turn. But now he's got a couple of options to get it done since he does have that Scout. But with this Dragonling out of Uzi, I don't necessarily know that Fizdarth's going to be able to actually push through damage on this turn and activate the plunders.
Exactly, and if Oooooooozzy having a Wheel of Ionia off the top of his deck, he has the answer for the Vi at this point of time.
Yeah, that is an absolutely critical draw for Uzi. This Vi was very close to getting a little bit out of control and taking over the game, as well as just getting off Ezreal targets in an impactful way was something that Uzi was starting to struggle with a little bit. But getting this Mystic Shot into the Will of Ionia off the top, thanks to the Shadow Assassin on the previous turn, he's going to be able to start picking off Fizdarth's board, building up that Ezreal, and getting closer and closer to game, as Fizdarth is only 6 spells away from dead.
Yes, and currently Ezreal's deck is at 6, right? For Oooooooozzy, I'm not wrong.
It's either 5 or 6.
Yep, and here comes a Island Navigator with Allegiance Saboteur. As you said, there's no bad one drops in this game right now.
And that's actually really big for Fizdarth because it does mean he's going to be able to undeniably get off a Plunder proc this turn. I say undeniably, even though you can deny that ability out of the Legion Saboteur, but that'd be a buck wild play out of Uzi. Unfortunately for Fizdarth, doesn't have the Riptide mana anymore, but we could see like a Black Market Merchant or a Pilfered Goods come down after the fact.
Yes, and especially facing a Ezreal Karma deck, every single card that is gonna be stolen is gonna be valuable for the Yoink player.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big reasons that we saw Twisted Fate Ezreal rise to such prominence both on ladder and in tournament was just it felt like a pretty decent counter to the Karma Ezreal decks. You get to take their removal away from them. You're still an Ezreal deck, so you get to take advantage of everything that you steal. But then you also have this low to the ground wide board game plan going for you with the, just all of these smaller units, the Petty Officer, the Dreadweight Deckhand, and you could just really aggro out your opponent and only have to finish off, 8 or 10 damage with that Ezreal.
Yes, and here we see Fizdarth attacking with everything but the Legion Saboteur. So does it actually mean that he does not need the Plunder effect for this particular?
Yeah, and if he's not going for the Plunder effect, then I'm really curious as to what his hand actually is that he was, taking a pass on turn 8 into this weak Island Navigator turn on turn 9. We're going to see the Static Shock now clean this up, and we're going to get to see if this Ezreal was on 5. Okay, it was on 6, so now the
On
Ezreal
6.
is leveled.
With leveled Ezreal, probably a Karma would be safe to be coming down right now.
Yeah, Karma. Okay, the Karma is the one with the barriers, so I don't think there's anything Fizdarth could do to actually clean that up this turn.
Make it rain into a thermal beam. Into.
There's a couple of options available, as you mentioned, like Static Shot, anything into a Thermo Beam, and maybe that's what he's been sitting on is a couple copies of Thermogenic Beam. That's something that Oooooooozzy has to be very aware of because your opponent's been making such low impact plays turn after turn. You've got to put them on some kind of range of things. Maybe another Vi, as we haven't seen Vault Breaker come up. Maybe Ezreal, maybe Rex. I think Rex is pretty much off the table at this point, but Thermo Beam definitely a card that you need to be aware of.
Exactly, and it seems like Oooooooozzy have to make a play at this point of time. It's either the Ezreal or the Karma.
Yeah, if you're going to go for one, I like the Karma more because it at least does get another card out of your opponent. Even if you're not getting, the Enlightened Karma combos off, you're still getting 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. And those are cards that could kill the Ezreal. And you're going to be in a much better position to win the game with the Ezreal since you have the attack token going into turn 10. 2 removal spells come out onto your Karma. And we're actually just going to see the pass out of Fizdarth. And I believe that's going to be lethal then.
Especially when Oooooooozzy has tons of spell in his hand with 10 mana to spare for this turn.
Yeah, and with the Deep Meditation still discounted, it's just Ezreal, Deep Med, Mushroom, and that is lethal. Nothing Fizdarth can do about that, and that is Exactsies for Oooooooozzy. And, we had mentioned this Ezreal deck could be the weak point out of Fizdarth, and with the extremely weak hand that he presented here, it's not looking good for this deck here.
Yep, and Fizdarth replying with Ezreal, and here, as you said it, about Mushroom into Deep Meditation, will be game.
I never know what to do or say when we're sitting in these 30-second windows before the game ends, even though it's clearly over.
Yes, and and that's the coffin for the nail for the coffin over here for Oooooooozzy, and winning this round and moving on into game number 3 with a 1-1 score. Just to remind you guys, this is a best of 5, so the winner will be winning with 3 points for this particular game.
Yeah, I always get caught up when I'm casting and I'm like, that was game number 3. All right, the set's over. Never mind. Here comes game number 4. We've got a little bit more action to bring you. We got hyped too early. And it looks like Oooooooozzy's going to, he took that mental reset. He's going to switch back to the Braum Lux.
Yes, and the Braum Lux moving on into the Ezreal Vi, and this is the matchup that I want to look out for because both decks actually have so much defensive and offensive maneuvers, and it all really comes down to draws. And Fizdarth spells will be able to pierce through high-end creatures.
Okay, so Oooooooozzy actually hangs on to the Unyielding Spirit, understanding that because this is not an Ionia deck, there's nothing that Fizdarth's going to be able to do to remove an Unyielding Spirited unit. Also keeps the Lux, so, playing a little bit confidently here is Oooooooozzy, understanding that Fizdarth doesn't have some of the wide tools available to the older versions of this deck. Does set himself up for a potential Chempunk Pickpocket play, playing against him a little bit, although he does have this Avarician Sentry to kind of block that one out as well. Overall, Oooooooozzy's feeling like he's in a really good position off of what is arguably a greedy mulligan.
Yes, it's definitely a greedy mulligan over here from Oooooooozzy, but however, we can't discount the fact that Fizdarth had so much removals in his deck. Having so much tempo with creatures that spawn 2 creatures, and at the same time having so much removals like Make It Rain and Thermogenic Beam as well.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, Oooooooozzy's got sort of these really high health units, and that's why we see Braum constantly come out as a counter to the Ezreal decks. If you could just, especially the Braum Swain deck, you have so many high health targets that demand Thermogenic Beam. Otherwise, you're going to have to throw 2 or 3 spells into something. And it looks like we're actually just going to offer up the Radiant Guardian as a block. This is another one of those high health units that you have to throw a bunch of spells at to take out. Of course, if you are just going to sit here and eat damage, you might as well, it's fine if this gets taken out by a Mystic Shot because it technically ate a Mystic Shot and a Petty Officer, and now all of your Mage Seekers are online. Oooooozzy's got to feel good about that one.
Especially, and that's where he say like he's picking on the Braum. He knows that Braum is gonna be coming up next. And at 4 mana, Fizdart probably has no way to take off this Braum at this point of time.
Yeah, it's really just Thermo Beam after the Braum attacks, and maybe Oooooozzy's considering that. I'd like to see the attack onto the Jagged Butcher, just because the Thermo Beam is going to deal 4 damage either way. You might as well soften up that unit since you do have the second Braum. You're going to be able to get that down, finish that unit off, and you're going to get that Mighty Poro as a blocker.
Exactly, and having another unit onto the board against Fizdarth's deck, tempo is probably everything at this time in the game.
And we see that single Yordle Grifter. We're going to have to track that one a little bit and see what card could have gotten stolen from Oooooozzy. And do you think there's a consideration to actually keep the Unyielding Spirit just so that your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to steal it from you?
Yes, probably that might be the reason he kept the Unyielding Spirit. But however, that one copy of Unyielding Spirit, what are the chances of him drawing that one copy of Unyielding Spirit of like so little drinking options from Fizdarth's side?
It's pretty low, but I'm not sure that Oooooozzy necessarily has an answer for an unyielded Ezreal. Most of the removal that we're seeing out of him is going to be at slow speed. It's pretty much just all, Lux lasers. We do have the Mage Seeker Investigators, but because he didn't have one of those in his opening hand, and he doesn't have a lot of draw power to dig for one, it's really just Avarosan Sentries. Maybe it was a consideration, but I also just think that the unyielding is going to play out really well for him in this matchup. I don't think there's a whole lot that Fizdarth can do, and it looks like Oooooozzy might just try and bank this spell mana this turn, get down that Lux, get down the unyielding onto it, and from there I think it's GG, as Fizdarth's main win condition isn't really the Ezreal, it's more the Riptide Rex, and Unyielding Spirit just completely takes that strategy off the table.
Exactly, and here we see a Radiant Guardian coming down from so it seems like he's not going for the Lux into Unyielding Spirit play at this point of time, but it seems like going for the Braum over here to get the trade of the Jagged Butcher and have another 3/3 Poro would be his best option right now for both bot development and tempo.
Yeah, this seems a little bit strange to me just because, you are kind of just offering up this Radiant Guardian into the Vi, and maybe that's a trade that he's fine making, but, I kind of would have liked to see the Lux come down on my turn. My opponent goes to challenge it. I throw down the Unyielding. It would have taken a lot of spells out of Fizdarth to sort of take that one out because we don't see any Get Excited, no 3 damage spells coming out of him. I think that Oooooozzy was in a pretty good spot to win the game at that point, but now we're going to see Fury of the North as the one stolen card, and that's actually going to be really big for Fizdarth.
Yes, killing off the Braum over here and denying that one extra Poro, and yet having the Jagged Butcher on the field as a tempo, as a creature on the board is really favorable to Fizdarth right now. Looking at this board state right now.
And it's possible that Oooooozzy wants to throw down this Unyielding Spirit onto the Radiant Guardian instead of a Lux, and that's why he sort of took the playlines that he did. But I think it's going to be really strange if this Unyielding doesn't come down now, when the Vi goes to challenge onto this. Maybe he wants to get the Lux down instead. Maybe he just played this to take out the Vi, but then I'd be a little surprised that he didn't attack with it last turn.
Yeah, that's pretty surprising, right? Like, there's no bad trade at this point of time with the Radiant Guardian, and even though a damaged Radiant Guardian, you could Unyielding Spirit this turn as well. So yeah, that's a good point over from here that he did not attack with Guardian.
Okay, yeah. So the Mage Seeker Investigator, I almost think we're guaranteed to see the Radiant Guardian at this point. Otherwise, I think we could have seen a Lux come down. Maybe just not wanting to, open that one up to something like a Make It Rain into the Vi attack. Maybe we are still going to see the Lux come down post-combat, but this Mage Seeker is actually a really key part of sort of passing priority back to Fizdarth and not just getting floated for 8 mana.
Exactly, so the ball is back to Fizdarth, and Fizdarth coming in with a Thermogenic Beam onto the Radiant Guardian. Here we see an Unyielding Spirit onto the Radiant Guardian as we did. So probably we won't see a Undying Lux, but with a Undying Radiant Guardian, it is still as dangerous as what it is.
Yeah, and that lifesteal is going to play up big for him. It doesn't play as well into the Ezreal strategy. You know, your opponent. Actually, I think it plays fine into the Ezreal strategy, specifically in this Bilgewater deck, because as we had mentioned a little bit before we got into this game, this is not the kind of Ezreal deck that's going to 20 to 0 you with the Ezreal. There's no Karma to come out to combo with that. You're
Mhm.
really reliant on Riptide Rex softening up the board. And now that that is off the table because all of the targets will go onto the Radiant Guardian, Oooooozzy's just going to be able to lifesteal his way back up into this game, and I think we're going to have to see this warning shot come out to upgrade the Vi, but I don't think that does enough for Fizdarth in this matchup.
Exactly, and probably this Vi might be the key winning factor for Fizdarth over here. With and the Runation of that top. Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
dumbfounded. You could not have asked for a better card off of that Mage Seeker Investigator. Oooooozzy is the card of the cards is with him today. He is absolutely favored to win, especially with that Ruination coming off the top with an Undying Radiant Guardian. He's got to feel phenomenal about the position that he's in.
And that progress day, and yeah, as what you said, this Ezreal deck has no options to burst him down from 20 to 0, and at the same time, he's constantly healing 5 every turn with the Undying Radiant Guardian right now.
Yeah, when you said that this was the matchup you were excited to see, I got to say, this is not how I expected this one to play out, with an Undying Radiant Guardian followed by a Ruination randomly created to completely clean up the board of Fizdarth, because that was the one consideration that Oooooozzy had, is that Fizdarth can still go around him, constantly challenge this Radiant Guardian over to the left side so that you cap out at that 20 life, then take all the damage, and maybe Ezreal can find a way to sneak out the game in the meantime. But that's not going to be the case here. Cleaning up this wide board, as well as having the double single combat still available to play on to any other threats that come down, there is nothing in Fizdarth's deck outside of this upgraded Vi that can actually live through the single combat.
Yes, exactly. So with this Ruination and Fizdart, probably would not expect a Ruination coming from Uzi's side of the board as well. So this Ruination is gonna be huge. It's gonna be changing the game for Uzi's favor, and with the hand that he has right now, this staff probably has no way to stop Uzi at this point in time.
Yeah, he's going to be too high for the Ezreal. The Rexes are off the table. I'm hard pressed to imagine a universe where Fizdarth actually gets to come back into this one, unless Oooooozzy plays it a little bit too greedily and throws down something like this Avarosan Sentry here. I think that, it's not as great of a Ruination as you want. You always want that dream like +3, +4, but because this was randomly created for you, like, you are getting a +4. You just have to take that, and then you have the single combat available to play onto anything your opponent wants to get down afterwards. But it looks like Oooooozzy is going to greed it out, fine trading a little bit of damage for, a few more units off the side of Fizdarth, who's going to get the pilfered goods. And it's sort of the one option that he has here is the Mage Seeker Investigator. Because he's played Progress Day, he has access to Detain.
Right, you're right. And then if he stole a Mage Seeker Investigator over here, and it would be huge because a Mage Seeker Investigator would detain the Radiant Guardian over here, and there goes the Undying.
He's got the single combat, and as we mentioned, upgraded Vi is the only thing that's going to live through that. And I think with the double single combat, he still gets to, he gets to double single combat the Vi. I don't think there's a safe enough detain target coming out of Fizdarth, but if he stole 2 Mage Seeker Investigators,
that would be different.
but that's a little bit too high roll for the ways that we've seen Fizdarth's game play out so far. I think that whatever he stole isn't going to make too much of a difference in this game, because we do see such a safe hand on the side of Oooooozzy, and there is one of these stolen cards. It was Radiant Guardian, but that one is killable.
And Uzi has options to actually kick off this Radiant Guardian as well. Going on with the attack with the Radiant Guardian over here. Do you think Fizdarth would be blocking this particular attack if he goes for it?
It's kind of hard to say. I think Fizdarth wants to preserve his life total long enough to try and find an answer. He does, he doesn't know that the single combats are on the side of Oooooozzy, so I think he's just trying to stall as long as he can, try to find one of those Mage Seeker Investigators, and really play that detain out. And there is a Mage Seeker Investigator.
Wow, and as you said, he really high rolled for the Investigator, and he has the detain. But however you said, there is no good units in right now.
Oh, this could be bad for Uzi. He needs to leave up 4 mana for that double single combat. If he plays the Mage Seeker Investigator, then Detain at the very least will take the Undying portion off of this Radiant Guardian, unless he can get a block out of Fizdarth here.
Yep, as so you see, he hovered his mouse over both the single combat. He probably knows I have an answer for your reading, for your detain right now.
Oh, well, this is sort of a scary situation. I think Uzi understands that, he needs to leave open double single combat mana, but this is as good as Fizdarth could have asked for. A 5 health tough unit and detain doesn't die to single combat, but Uzi just has 2 of them.
Well, this is what they call a skilled player. A skilled player not just have to play well, but at the same time, you must have that factor of luck.
Yeah, and Uzi, a previous DOR champion, definitely has that luck on his side. We see the thumbs up out of the face cam there, and he is feeling good about his chances. I wouldn't be surprised to see Fizdarth scoop off this double single combat.
Yes, exactly. You see Uzi defending himself against this detain with double single combat, healing himself back up to 20. Does Fizdarth... It looks like Fizdarth does not have any answer against double single.
Yeah, and now down to 10 life is Fizdarth. Does still have, the opportunity for an Ezreal win, although be it an extremely slim one, he does technically have the capabilities to string together enough burn spells, although I don't think he's super far along on the targeting side of things. Might have to get to a point where he can actually just throw down the Riptide Rex to level the Ezreal, but that's really not going to feel great. And now Uzi has Harsh Winds to protect all of his board. That's going to level the Lux, and we should see this game end on the following turn.
Yep, this is probably the end of this particular game, especially when Lux is going to be leveled with Harsh Winds. Good.
Okay, I thought Uzi was actually going to throw down the Prismatic Barrier there, just because Lux does already have 4 spell mana banked into her. You want to play with as effectively as possible with that mana, so you throw down the Prismatic Barrier. That's going to let you survive the Vi hit anyway. She doesn't strike, so you don't take the 5 damage. You get that Final Spark, and then if your opponent does have a removal spell to get rid of the barrier, then you can throw down the Harsh Winds to get a second Final Spark. But either way, the Lux is going to deal 5 damage to the Lux. We're going to see this Final Spark run it over. And with only 6 mana left, I don't think Uzi can set up a wide enough board to sort of, come back and win in an impactful way. And it feels like we are back in limbo, sort of that state of the game where the game is over but hasn't ended yet. There is nothing Fizdarth can do to come back into this, but we have to sit here for another couple of minutes and watch him struggle.
As here we see a Thermal Beam onto the Lux, and as you said, the barrier coming down to protect the Lux. And it seems like Fizdarth have only option right now is to scoop, not waste any time, and move on to game number 3 so that he can get a edge. He have more time to play out the rest of the other games.
Yeah, Uzi not going to be able to pick up the win on this turn, I don't think. Fizdarth should just be, have the blockers to get around it, but then, you go into your next turn. Okay, we are just going to see the surrender out of Fizdarth, sort of accelerating this one a little bit. And once again, this Ezreal deck falls, and I think Uzi's got a really good shot to 3-0 this one. We are going to see the sea monsters come out of him now, and, elusives are still on the table if Fizdarth wants to even up the score 2-2.
Yes, and what do you think of this particular matchup? Bringing in his sea monsters against either one of his staff deck, and it seems like it's gonna be Kinko elusive. So, which deck do you think is gonna be really favorable against in this matchup?
So sea monsters are sort of widely regarded as having this good widespread of matchups. You have the early game to survive aggro decks. The problem that sea monsters have run into, and the reason we don't see them very often, is that they don't play well into Overwhelm, Elusives, or Fearsome. Your early game is very weak. It's all about chump blockers, and you don't have a lot of great answers for the elusive units. We're seeing Grasp of the Undying instead of Withering Wail, but we're seeing the Elixir of Irons out of Fizdarth anyway, and it's very possible that Fizdarth can actually just overwhelm the early game of Uzi, with these elusive units. The Dreg Dredger's not going to do anything about that. Thorny Toad not going to do anything about that. And, it is possible for Fizdarth to pick up a win here. If we don't see him win in the first couple of turns, though, I think Uzi's going to be able to take this one over, especially with this Riptide picked up. That stun can be massive in a matchup like this.
Yes, and especially he has a trash as well for being a challenger unit to pick off anything that he wants from this outside of the board.
Unfortunately, Fizdarth has had an extremely slow start here. Has not been able to, get anything down. And I think it'd be really smart of Oooooozzy to go for the pass here. Once he does develop the Jaw Hunters, you don't really need to race your opponent. And if you can get them to float turn 3 as well, you're going to feel phenomenal about something like that. I don't think the 6 damage is necessarily worth stopping Fizdarth from playing a Shadow Assassin and really stumbling on his mana further than he already has.
Exactly. So yeah, Fizdarth passing in with at turn number 3, and Oooooozzy attacking for 6 damage over here. Does that mean that Fizdarth actually bricked at this point of time?
No, it looks like Oooooozzy goes for the damage play instead of the sort of conservative one. Unfortunately for Fizdarth, the play is the Zed, and that is something that you can block out with these Dreg Dredgers. You're going to see Braum come down as well, and that could play in big to this Jaw Hunters. We do see, the Vile Feast in the hand for Oooooozzy to try and finish that one off. Although with Fizdarth passing the first couple of turns, you would have to assume that he's got a couple of the spells in his deck available to him. There's a very good chance we're going to see an Elixir of Iron come out. And I think that means you want to play the Riptide onto this Braum, but, it's not getting any easier to remove.
Here we see a Valfist immediately coming down for Oooooozzy trying to kill off the Braum. And subsequently onto the next turn, you have the Trash to actually deal with the Dead as well. So I feel like Oooooozzy probably might be in a comfortable position unless a Elixir of Iron coming down right over here.
Oh, and actually no Elixir of Iron out of Fizdarth. I keep thinking that I have reads on his hand because he's making such weak passes in these aggressive decks, and apparently he just doesn't have anything available to him. I have to wonder what this hand looks like. There are a couple of higher end cards that he could be clogging up on. He's got a couple of 4-mana cards, Deny, Will of Ionia, Kingu Lifeblade, getting the Braum down over that makes a fair bit of sense. We do see Wayfarer Hatchlings, as well as, what is the name of this tiger? Jeweled Protector in the deck.
Yep.
So, it is possible that he's just got a much higher curve going on, and that is sort of the strength of the Kingu Elusives, is they don't mind going to the late game. They have the tools to deal with something like that.
Yeah, but at this speed that Fizdarth is going at, he might probably be ran over by Oooooozzy or Little Creature.
Yeah, the Beast Below is actually a pretty pivotal pickup for Oooooozzy. It's not a Devourer of the Depths, which you would like to see, but Beast Below is actually going to play out just fine for him. It's, probably his best okay, never mind. His best option for turn 6 is now just replaying the Thresh.
Yeah, so Beast Below is probably free once you reach deep. With the Nautilus on board, the Beast Below will be free. It's going to be a free 7/7?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, once upon deep. So, having the Beast Below over here is going to be. And here we see a Ruination top deck of Oooooozzy. And this is like drawing really hard at this point of time.
Yeah, I mean, we saw one Ruination tossed earlier, but Oooooozzy's going to pick up that second one. And, there could be I think Fizdarth's only running one copy of Deny, so even if you get that out on this Ruination, that does just sort of leave you available to play any other spell that you want for the rest of the game. I think it's fine to throw down Ruinations in situations like this just to eat the Deny, but I do also like this Thresh development. The only thing that you really care about on Fizdarth's board right now is that Zed, unless he can get down something like a Jeweled Protector, get that big unit down. He's not really wide enough for an impactful Windfarer Hatchling, but I don't think Oooooozzy's that close to deep either. We haven't seen a lot. Oh, no, we did see a lot of toss. We saw 2 Dreg Dredgers on the opening turns.
He's 9 cards away from deep. Firing Mentor, buffing something.
And this is going to put him even closer. Just, one more Jettison and he's there. But this next turn is looking pretty weak for Oooooozzy. You could throw down the Nautilus, but that takes you off the Ruination. And I think right now, Oooooozzy really has to be contemplating this Ruination. And he's going to be able to get a little bit more mana out of Fizdarth potentially, when he goes for the attack onto this Zed. I think Fizdarth's going to want to protect that again. But I don't think it's going to be enough mana to take Deny off the table. And if we do see Deny onto this Ruination, Fizdarth could just have lethal on the following turn.
Exactly what you said. And yeah, the priority passing back to Fizdarth over here. If Fizdarth ever develops the board over here right now, and a Ruination is going to go huge for Oooooozzy at this point of time.
Looks like Oooooozzy's considering the Nautilus. I think if you're not firing off Ruination this turn, you probably want to get the Maokai down. And I'm curious to see if Fizdarth is actually going to, Fizdarth can just throw down another unit, still have Deny mana. Oooooozzy's in a bit of a rough position. I think he just has to go for this.
Has to go for the here. And however, the creature that was buffed by the Jeweled Tiger Druid Protector is not out yet, so he might be still in a little bit of danger at this point.
Yeah, without those vengeances in the deck of Oooooozzy, you don't have, that sort of protection where you Ruination and then you just vengeance whatever comes down after the fact. He does have the Riptide to stun it out, can get that out with Nautilus on the following turn. And depending on what it is coming out of Fizdarth, I think this Ruination, if it works out, is just going to be game over unless, it was a massive, even if it was a massive, say, Green Glade duo, something that Fizdarth can get down this turn and throw into an open attack. I'm not loving his chances in this one.
But there might be a chance of this stuff not going for the open attack and putting down to buff the go as well. So if his stuff is that greedy, he might play into it directly. But it seems like Oooooozzy right now is going for the Ruination play, and does his stuff have the deny for this particular Ruination? And of course, there he has it. He has the deny to deny that Ruination. It seems like Oooooozzy is in trouble right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to count up the damage on Fizdarth's side of the board right now. If he does go for, an open attack, it's looking like something around somewhere in the 14 or 15 range. So Oooooozzy can survive by blocking and riptiding, but there's a lot that Fizdarth could have to prevent that as well. But, there's Twin Disciplines in the deck. There's Fury of the North. He could not go for an open attack. There's no punish on the side of Oooooozzy for just, playing out more elusives. And here we see the massive Kinku Lifeblade.
That's a really, really huge Ginkgo Life Blade. 5/5 over here. It seems like Oooooozzy has to fire off the Riptide at this point.
Yeah, he's going to have to Riptide that Kinku Lifeblade to live here. He does get down the pivotal 2 blockers for the Jeweled Protector and the other unit, sort of the 2 blockers that he actually can handle. But Oooooozzy's, not well poised to get back into this game anyway. He's going to survive the turn, but he doesn't really have a lot of burst potential onto his opponent unless he can top deck Atrocity and get down this Nautilus and then just finish off his opponent, who is at that critical 13, health life point break.
Yep, and and throughout this whole weekend, we actually learned, top decking is a skill, and I believe Oooooozzy is powerful enough to top that Atrocity for the next turn.
Yeah, Fizdarth has lethal with Fury of the North. Could just be considering the implications of another Riptide, whether or not he wants to go for it. I think he goes for it every time if he does have it. But if not, yeah, Oooooozzy's still not out of the woods. Would need that sort of Atrocity top deck to bail him out on the following turn.
Right now, does Fizdarth actually have that Fury of the North to close off the game? Like, he does not have it, and here we see a full-on attack from Fizdarth, bringing down to 4 damage. Kind of critical range at this point.
Yeah, that is a very scary life total to be at. Fizdarth probably going to throw down this Inspiring Mentor at the very least. Still play mana efficiently. Still gets to float that 3 spell mana into the following turn. And then, Will of Ionia is still a card that can come out to stop this Atrocity play if Oooooozzy actually does find it. But if he doesn't, I'm not seeing anything else that he can draw to get him back into this since the other Ruination was already tossed. He does still have 1 more turn to find it, though.
Yes, and a Devourer of the Deep over here. Would it make a difference? I don't think the Devourer is going to make any difference time with 5 elusive units on the board from Fizdarth's side.
Yeah, Oooooozzy's going to be able to take out a number of them. Actually, can kill one with the sapling. Oh, never mind. The Will of Ionia onto the Nautilus means that this is not a 2-mana Devourer. This is not a Nautilus's Riptide in hand, and that is just going to be an instant surrender out of Oooooozzy.
And here we see a surrender from Oooooozzy, moving on to game number 5. Currently, right now, with the score of 2-2. So it could be anyone's game at this point in time. It's going to be Oooooozzy's Deep going up against Fizdarth Ezreal Vi. So, do you think that Ezreal Vi might be in a little bit of trouble against this particular deck?
Absolutely. As we had mentioned earlier, the Riptide Rex is the main win condition of that deck. It does not pair well into these deep decks. Oooooozzy has the tools to stave off the early unit aggression with his Dreg Dredgers and his Thorny Toads and his Dead Bloom Wanderers. Mist Call is going to come up big in this matchup. That is easily one of the best counters to Thermogenic Beam. And anytime you're playing sea monsters into a non-Ionia, non-super over-the-top aggro deck like the Darrowing deck, you're going to feel pretty good about your chances.
Yeah, so, let's see if Oooooozzy would get a good hand over here to get himself too deep early to control the board, and at the same time finish as fast as possible with big monsters.
Yeah, I think Fizz is really going to have to play into the Ezreal side of things, and I'm just trying to count up the amount of things he has in his deck that actually target things. We've got 3 Thermo, 3 Make It Rain, 3 Mystic, 3 Static, and that's it. Granted, Static and Make It Rain are going to get off multiple targets, so it is possible, but there's not, a whole lot that he's actually going to be able to do. I think it's going to take some pretty big pilfer luck on the side of Fizdarth. Grabbing a Ruination or a big Atrocity for sort of a cheese win is really his only option in a game like this.
And currently we are still awaiting Fizdarth. Fizdarth is locked on his last deck, and we're moving on to game number 5 of top 16 over here. And it's Oooooozzy against Fizdarth with Beat against Ezreal Vi. So what do you think of this particular hand that Oooooozzy has right now?
I think he's going to ship away most of it. I think Thorny Toad is probably the only thing he keeps. Maybe he hangs on to the Abyssal Eye. It's not a particularly strong card when you're not deep, so we actually are going to see him ship it away. And I like this hand a lot more. I would have liked to, a Missed Call would have kind of made this the perfect hand. But you're not mad at something like this. You do have the Thorny Toad to fight for the early board. That Vile Feast is going to be pivotal in helping you clean up that extra 1 health on the Petty Officer. And Jaw Hunter's just a really good card.
And here we see a Campang Pickpocket coming down from trying to cheese that steal from this, to try to steal a spell from Oooooozzy, but Oooooozzy says no, dropping down Thorny Toad.
Yeah, so I like Campang Pickpocket a lot in this format. I don't think it ever actually gets off its ability, but it is sort of the best 2 mana, 3 attack unit that you have to contest the board against aggro decks. Unfortunately for Fizdarth, that doesn't matter against Oooooozzy's lineup. He brought 0 aggro decks into this format. He's just taking it slow and, is pretty well poised to pick up the win here. This is kind of the matchup. This is kind of the way that we kind of saw this match playing out. It comes down to 2-2, and Oooooozzy just has to 3-0 this Ezreal deck.
So passing the turn over to Fizdarth, what could Oooooozzy do at this point of time? Probably a Vile Feast on right now.
It looks like he's just saving up that spell mana for the Maokai turn, and I don't think, once again, Fizdarth doesn't have a lot of good answers for this Maokai. We actually see the Grasp of the Undying now going to line up beautifully onto this Ezreal, and things are just working out phenomenally for Oooooozzy thus far.
Once again, the top deck save Oooooozzy again.
Okay, so I see why Oooooozzy's one of the best players in Southeast Asia. I see why he got that Duels of Runeterra win.
Yeah, man. So Fizdarth is attacking with the Ezreal over here, and is probably gonna play into the Grasp of Undying. And it seems like there is no way that Fizdarth could protect Ezreal at this point of time.
Yeah, we typically don't see Ezreal or Heimerdinger venture outside of Ionia too often, just because you do run into scenarios like this where Ezreal's a great card that can go over a lot of decks and start to take over an early game if your opponent doesn't have the removal suite available to them, or maybe you get off a a free Mystic Shot, you stave off some aggression, then all of a sudden you're playing Denies to protect it. In the Heimer deck, you have Spirit's Refuge and things like that, but in a Bilgewater deck, you have absolutely no protection for this Ezreal. If your opponent wants to kill it, they're gonna kill it. Here we're going to see the Vile Feast once again. You have 1 HP. I play a 1 damage spell. There's nothing in your repertoire that you could play that's going to stop me from doing this.
So that is the biggest weakness for this Bilgewater PNC style of deck. And wow, and a Path Poro coming from the Petty Officer might be huge for this Fizdarth over here, as it doesn't allow Oooooozzy to attack at this point of time.
Yeah, it's also, going to be kind of critical that Poro could actually, it's not enticing for Oooooozzy to block that, so we could see that as Fizdarth's Plunder activator for the next couple of turns if he wants to string together like a Black Market Merchant and a couple of Pilfered Goods.
Oooooozzy feeling really awkward right now, not knowing what to do with that 1/1 Poro on the board.
Yeah, I thought Oooooozzy was going to develop a Maokai just because he has 2 of them. You can get the Thermo Beam out of your opponent. Maybe it's not as mana inefficient as you want your opponent to play. And, he's not going to have first priority on the next turn either. So it looks like he just wants to get a little bit more mana out of his opponent. And I think now he's absolutely going to slam down that Maokai.
Yeah, his opponent being at 3. mana over here, he probably could not do anything to Maokai at this point, passing the turn over back to Fizdar.
Yeah, and now if Fizdarth wants to open with a Thermogenic Beam, that's going to be a huge mana commitment. And if he doesn't, Oooooooozzy does get to play this Jaw Hunters, get a little bit of toss off, could play the Abyssal Eye if he really wanted to. Like, Oooooooozzy's got options. He can, he has complete control of the game. He's sitting pretty at 20 life. Fizdarth is not super high on Ezreal targets, doesn't have a whole lot of cards in hand. It hasn't done anything super threatening so far, and Oooooooozzy, scaling into this late game super well.
And especially with Abyssal Eye, I believe Fizdar does not have any way to do Eye other than burn spells or Ezreal blocking it herself.
Yeah, and I think it's always and we actually are going to see the Ezreal, and that's going to be a little unfortunate. Oooooooozzy or Fizdarth could take out the Abyssal Eye, but it's going to take either 2 spells or a Thermogenic Beam, at which point he can't play the Mystic Shot. He gets off the Ezreal anyway, so this Abyssal Eye just coming in big for Oooooooozzy, understanding that even with, the Riptide in hand, he's safe to sort of tap out and play this one.
Yeah, so let's see what Fizdar could do right now. Fizdar with stacks on the Ezreal right now. With 6 mana up. Like, what could be the best possible play stuff over here? Static Shock? Mystic Shot? Eye?
Yeah, that's probably the best bet. Instead, it's going to be Thermo Beam onto the Maokai, and that does dissuade all of the attacks from Fizdarth, and it does seem like the proper play. Unfortunately, Oooooooozzy has a second copy of Nautilus, or not Nautilus, Maokai.
Okay.
Yeah, Maokai's up, and he picks up the third Maokai. And Maokai's a phenomenal win condition against these Ezreal decks. We've actually already seen the second Ezreal out of Fizdarth, and we had talked about how that's sort of the win condition he has to play to because Riptide Rex does nothing in a matchup like this. And so far, being down to Ezreal as your opponent playing towards this Maokai win condition, Fizdarth is having, almost no chance at coming back into this one. It would take a Riptide Rex on the following turn before Oooooooozzy can get down some of these big units and go deep. But even then, it's not a phenomenal chance for Fizdarth.
And a 7 mana Thermal Beam onto Maokai over here. Draw Hunter easily gonna pick off the Ezreal, and at the same time drawing him another card, getting him 1 card closer to.
This is why I was surprised to see Oooooooozzy cut down on Abyssal Eye. I think this is one of, I think 3 Abyssal Eye, 3 Devourer has to go into every Sea Monster deck. I absolutely love everything about this card. I love the body, that it's elusive, that it draws you cards. And now Fizdar finds himself in a really awkward position. He can get off the, he can get off that plunder effect if he wants to this turn. Oooooooozzy potentially contemplating the Grasp of the Undying just to deny a potential Riptide Rex. But we'll have to see how he actually wants to play this one out. I don't think the Riptide is too scary in a situation like this, but it looks like, Oooooooozzy's going to respect it.
Yeah, denying the Riptide Rex from coming down. It's not just 7 damage from the Riptide itself, but the Riptide is actually kind of a big body as well, and you probably do not want to deal with Rex at this point of time with just 1 creature on the board.
Yeah, and Oooooooozzy actually just going to throw down the Maokai, says that, you've already played 2 Thermo Beams to take these out, and now we see the Riptide come down, but Fizdarth didn't get to hit face this turn. And Oooooooozzy looks a little confused. Maybe Fizdarth thought he actually did hit face, but Oooooooozzy played around it and gets rewarded for it.
Probably needs kind of a tempo play for Fizdarth, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the 7/4 body is, impactful. It's not something that Oooooooozzy can super easily clean up, but we are going to see that pulled to the side by the Maokai, and then a little bit more damage pushed through. Devour of the Depths can even finish that one off if he really wants it to.
And here we see a Island Navigator coming down, and probably a Devour of the Depths going on. Terror of the Tides might be the best play right now for Oooooooozzy.
Yeah, this does take a couple of blockers off the table, or at least gives him some really impactful trades.
Bringing both the sea creatures in front and challenging the Riptide Rex to back. Enough.
Yeah, it looks like Oooooooozzy just wanted to hang on to the Devour of the Depths for, a potential later play. I'm not sure what he could be saving them for, but I don't think the Terror of the Tides play is necessarily bad. This is sort of one of your best opportunities to actually get it down, and it just pushes through a lot of damage, puts your opponent on that turn 2, on that 2-turn clock rather.
Here we see Fizdar having a chance to go down to 8 health over here, and with 5 mana and 4 cards in hand, it seems like there's nothing much that.
Yeah, this is, the situation that we thought Fizdarth was going to find himself in. So far, things just kind of playing out as expected, as unfortunate as that is for Fizdarth. I just think that Oooooozzy had, the better lineup on the day. We talked about it a lot in the pregame. This is kind of exactly how we saw this matchup going, and just kind of going through the motions here. You have to feel a little bit bad for Fizdarth because it does look like he did have a pretty big stream of bad luck. Had some unfortunate pulls. Oooooozzy just getting the insane top decks at the moments that he needs them. But all in all, this is why we expected it to play out the way that it has.
Yeah, but however, having that 1/1 creature on the board, it could allow Fizdarth to get the plunder effect off immediately upon after attacking.
Yeah, that's true. Oooooozzy, I think he's going to go deep here, though, in which case his board is going to be a little bit too big for the Rex to be impactful, since he is going to have, the priority sequence after this first attack goes off. But as you mentioned, yeah, Riptide does open up as a possibility to try and fight Oooooozzy's way back into this game.
So we see Oooooozzy dropping down the Devourer of the Dead, or liberating the Riptide Rex over here. And would Fizdarth actually have that second copy of Riptide Rex to clear off the board right now? But it's highly unlikely, right?
Yeah, that's sort of the problem that Pilfer has always run into. Riptide not doing a lot against these really impactful boards that Sea Monsters puts out, and that is going to do about as little as a Riptide Rex possibly could.
And here you see Oooooozzy laughing and smiling with so much like happiness, like, you're not gonna touch my creep.
And I think this Dreg Dredgers, if I've done my math correctly, puts Maokai at 24 out of 25. Yeah, so
yes.
Now if Fizdarth does go for the attack, Oooooozzy can throw out a block with the Dreg Dredgers, and that means that Maokai's going to level, and Fizdarth's on more of a clock than he was previously.
Alternatively, he could go for the Valface onto the Dreg Dredger as well. But no, I don't think that should be the right play. Wow, he's going for the attack with the Riptide Rex.
Yeah, it looks like Oooooozzy's just going to lose his entire, or at least most of his board here. Fizdarth's going to lose most of his board here. Oooooozzy can actually even line up the Maokai, or not the Maokai, under the Petty Officer. The attacks didn't quite line up for that because it is going to evolve mid-combat. It would become a 2-3, but, the Petty Officer just a little bit too big for something like that.
Here we see a leveled out Maokai over here, bringing Fizdarth deck down to 4 cards right now, and Fizdarth is on a 4-turn clock starting next turn.
Yeah, and I think Oooooozzy just has lethal. If you devour this Riptide Rex, then thanks to the Terror of the Tides, your opponent has no blockers. Or actually, you can just attack for lethal now, as this Sapling can pull the Riptide to the side, and that is 16 damage that you have represented off of your 2 Sea Monsters.
And that should be enough to close the game over here for Oooooozzy. Total of 16 damage right over here, and Fizdarth does not have an answer, and there we have it. Oooooozzy winning the top 16 match over here, moving on to the top 8 with a 3-4 line. Congratulations.